Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of, oh, I hit the wrong button. There it is, Observable Flutter. My name is Craig Labenz, and I'm your host, even though after all these weeks, I still don't know what button to hit. Welcome. I'm excited to be back after a few weeks away. I was traveling, of course, for Flutter-related events, but today, I'm very excited to return to an old topic. We had this guest on Observable Flutter almost a year ago to discuss, I believe it was the 1.0 release for Serverpod. But today, we're going to be talking about the 1.2 release. So let's start to get into it. First of all, as you all know, this is the Flutter community. So let's treat each other wonderfully. We're all coming together today under the Flutter Code of Conduct, the YouTube Code of Conduct, all of those things. So please be on your best behavior. And without any further ado, today's guest is Viktor Lidholt, the CTO of Serverpod, which is a full stack Flutter solution. And I won't spoil any more of it if you've not heard of it, and I'll let Viktor do the talking himself. So, Viktor, welcome to Observable Flutter.
Thank you. Great to be here again.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were on a year ago to tell us all about the initial stable release of Serverpod, but you didn't go on a year-long vacation in the interim. You've been hard at work, and now we're up to version 1.2, and there's a lot of new stuff. So what are you excited to unveil today?
Yeah, so I mean, since a year ago, lots have happened. We're now 4 people working full time on Serverpod, and we are about to double the team. So we'll be hopefully 8 in not too long of a time, which is very, very exciting. We actually just raised second round of funding for 1.7 million euro, and we are we also, like, as a product, we've taken Serverpod quite a few steps ahead. When I was first here, it was like a very workable solution, but now it's way more complete. So all the work we added for 1.2 is we actually put more man hour into that than we did for like the 1.2 release. So we have both built out our test suite. We have like it's probably around 3,000 tests by now, and there's like a full the ORM, which turned out to be actually way more complex to build than we initially thought. It is now very feature complete. We have database migrations, we have relations. We're going to have a little bit of a look at the database migrations today. So yeah, overall, we added like so much stuff to Serverpod in the past year. So if you checked it out a year ago, you should definitely have a second look today, because there's a lot that happened. And yeah, I mean, even more will happen obviously over the next year when we get even more people working on it. And obviously it's open source, so we have a whole bunch of people helping us out in the community too. So I really want to send a big thank you to all of those.
Yeah, just knowing about how much Flutter itself benefits from folks outside of Google who regularly contribute. I know that can mean everything. Congrats on the fundraising. Congrats on doubling the size of your team coming up. That's incredible. I've been playing with Serverpod myself a little bit and was testing the migrations that we're going to go through today. And they work great. You mentioned the ORM ended up being one of the most complicated parts that you built, vastly exceeded your expectations. There's
just so many edge cases there, and we really wanted to do it like the right way. So we made sure everything is type safe, which is great. Most other ORMs you have to use strings for a lot of things. Well, we added like native Dart types, so everything will be type checked, and like when you build your queries and everything, you get like the help of your editor in just another way.
Right.
Use correct types.
But what I really was impressed by, and we can go into this a little bit, we'll see this in action when we start building in a few minutes here, is that that handoff between the model and the ORM, where it's like, okay, please do your thing, get this to the database. And it's the last time the developer sees the object, right? It's deep in Serverpod after that. That handoff isn't tedious for the developer. Some other ORMs, because they also aim for type safety, will require the wrapping of every single field individually by the developer, and all has to be hand typed. And then it is type safe, and it's like, okay, cool. But it just feels extraordinarily painful to actually use. And I was very, very pleased and very impressed with just the developer experience of Serverpod. So really well done there.
Thank you. I mean, it does a whole lot of complex things under the hood, but we really wanted to make it feel easy to work with. I mean, that's the main design philosophy we had. Both that it should be easy to use, but you should also not be limited in any way. So you can. There's still queries we cannot make. You can always resort to doing raw database queries.
SQL.
And
right.
So you don't really have any limitations there. But
right. Yeah. Before I started using Flutter myself, I was primarily a Python and a Django developer, and I really, and I still really adore the Django ORM. I think it's one of the coolest pieces of technology I've ever used. And it was it did a night, Python is just a very different language than Dart. And so it leaned into some of Python's strengths and was an extraordinarily pleasant ORM to use, while also getting into the extreme depths of crazy SQL that it could generate. But there is a point where, you're joining something, maybe you have a subquery, you select from the subquery, it's like SQL gets wonky, you can write some crazy SQL queries.
Sure.
And being able to represent absolutely all of that in an ORM is valuable, but the ORM will necessarily get pretty darn complicated. And just knowing how to tell the ORM to write the crazy query becomes its own deep level of mastery that someone has to have.
Yeah.
So anyway, the escape hatch of raw SQL, I think that is a pretty good one. So
anyway, I think it's something you need to have there. It's impossible to cover every single case, or it might be possible, but may not be worthwhile anyway, because maybe someone wants to use an extension to Postgres or that we don't support. Then you can still do that. There can be many use cases.
Right. Yeah, I was even in my testing actually just the other day, I was using an extension, the UUID generate extension, and getting that, playing with that, and it worked great. Okay, so someone chat is actually, I'm hearing my camera is laggy. I probably should have restarted my computer this morning. I don't think there's anything I can do about that now, but that stinks. Phil Mingo asks, what exactly is Serverpod? Yeah, so let's give a little crash course. What's your elevator pitch for Serverpod from the top?
Yeah, the elevator pitch is that we built a backend specifically for Flutter. So that means that you can write all your code through the whole stack in Dart, and it's a really seamless experience. So to pass objects between your server and the client, add methods. You add methods to Serverpod to your endpoints, and you call them from your Flutter app just as if they were local methods. So that is a really neat feature. So you can even throw an exception on the server, and it will be serialized. It gets unpacked in your Flutter client and rethrown. Obviously, only for exceptions you sort of want to have passed to the client. But it's really a seamless solution for building your whole full stack app in Flutter and Dart. So that's been our main goal, and we really wanted to make it very seamless, that use all the best practices that you used to from Flutter and bring that to the backend. So I guess Serverpod in a way is, what Flutter is to front end, Serverpod is to the backend. In a way, the way we think about it.
Yeah, there's. You mentioned that feature of being able to call backend code just like it's front-end code.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, one of Google's biggest, I don't know, Google's released a lot of big open source technologies, but one of the biggest is probably gRPC,
right?
Which is it's a code generator, a client-side and server-side code generator. And its whole thing is to be language agnostic. So you could generate your front end in Dart, your back end in Java or Python or Dart, whatever language you want.
Yeah.
And the point of these technologies, right? They generate code on both sides of the divide, the network divide, the HTTP divide. And by the magic of code generation, those things are guaranteed to know how to talk to each other. So I like to look into the methods of these generated front end calls that feel local and just see like, how does this work? How does this connect to the backend? And you see that it has a hard coded URL that it goes to. And then on the server, there's a resolver that's sitting at that exact same URL, and it knows how to decode the exact request body that was sent from the front end. And so everything is totally mapped together. And it's super, super, super cool. So maybe, Victor, if we have time today, we can actually, command click into some of the methods that are generated.
Oh yeah, for sure.
See how see how it all comes together.
Yeah,
because it's quite cool.
So Serverpod is not too dissimilar from gRPC. I mean, we look at all the frameworks. So there are a few things that we can do, I think, a little bit better for the Flutter community, because gRPC supports like everything. We were planning to add maybe more client languages, but it allows us to add sort of Dart-specific features to the whole stack. Plus, we also use the Dart analyzer to analyze your server code, which means that you don't have to like specify the methods somewhere as you do in gRPC. You just add them to your code, and we can find them and reproduce them basically. But I was planning to show a little bit about how that works in the demo.
Right. Well, this is probably the perfect time to segue into that. So,
all right,
Victor, the stage is yours if it wasn't already.
All right, cool. So I was thinking today that we would build a little chat app. We can call it like a Slack clone. And something cool that we did in Serverpod is that we have something we call modules. And a module is basically, it's server code, it's client code, and it's Flutter code packaged in one package. And they all know how to talk to each other. And on your server, your module will run in its own namespace, so you can't like collide with anything else. So it gets like its own endpoints, its own data models. So we have built two modules to date. One is authentication module if you want to sign in with Google or Apple or Firebase or email. So we're going to do an email sign-in today, and then on top of that, we're going to build a chat. So, well, I'll just dive in. So we're going to start by creating a Serverpod project, and then we have a command for that. Just Serverpod create.
My first thought, could you make your font bigger?
Ooh.
A little command bigger. Plus action.
Oh, command plus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope. So I see you're using terminal and not iTerm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. Is that a little bit better?
That is a little bit better, yeah. I tend to favor text that feels cartoonishly oversized for me.
I see. Yeah. I thought I was there, but I guess
this is pretty good.
You're not just to go up. Okay. Good point. So we do a Serverpod create. We'll call this Babel. I thought it could be a fun name for the chat app.
It's cute.
And
I like
Serverpod will set up our project for us. So it creates both our server, but it also creates a Flutter app. So if we go into the Babel directory here now, and if I do an ls, you'll see we have a Babel server to the right. We have Babel Flutter, that's our app, and then we have the Babel client. The client we typically won't need to touch too much. So I'll open VS Code here, see if that.
Yeah, to your point about the client not being touched very often, is that where the generated glue code lives? That's the right way to think about that?
Exactly. So the reason we put that in its own package, we could have like placed it within the Flutter app, but I mean, there can be use cases where you want to have more than one app that talks to your server. So it's nice to have it in its own package. Or maybe you don't want to create a Flutter app at all. Then you can just throw away the Flutter project and you can use maybe make a CLI tool that uses Serverpod.
I see.
So
right.
So we did that for a sort of flexibility. But I thought, just give me a second here. Yeah, here we go. We'll start by installing the modules. So the modules are basically Dart packages. So if we look here in the server, we have, we're going to go through all these, touch this in some way across our journey, all the different packages. But we'll start in the pub spec of the server. And we just going to add Serverpod auth server here. And so
now, one thing I noticed in your docs is that all of these things are version pinned to each other. So it's no coincidence that they're both 1.2.5. All the things will be version revved together, and you just always use the same number for everything that you're using.
Yeah. So we did it like this because there were quite a few had a little bit of issues with like getting everything synced up with your tooling and different packages. But I think for Serverpod 2, we're planning to relax that a little bit and make sure everything still works. Since the framework is more mature now, we will be able to do that and still guarantee
just
that
less,
you will be
less breaking changes. Yeah, okay.
Yes. So before we do this, I figured we will just start the server and see what that looks like and what like the default project looks like. So I'm going to go into the Babel. Oh, sorry. CD Babel server.
Yep.
And we actually, for Serverpod 2, you can already try this out. We made a version of Serverpod we call Serverpod Mini. I wrote a Medium article about how you can use that today. But if you use that, you just get like the sort of raw version of Serverpod without any bells and whistles. So it's just basically the client server part. But if you run the full Serverpod, you will need to run a database for it to work, because we use the database, say for the chat, we want to store the messages. And for most applications, you probably want to have the database. And to run that, we're using Docker, and when you run it locally. And that's just, I mean, you can set up your Postgres server if you want to, but it's quite a lot more work. With Docker, it's just a single command. So that's why we picked that as an option. And Docker compose app build. So this is how you start your Docker container. And everything is green there. So now we have like a database up and running. Serverpod will create these default containers for you. So you just have to have Docker installed and up and running on your computer for this to work.
Incredibly easy.
I like to think so. And if we start the server now, first time we start it, we want to do apply migrations. And what that does is it has created a migration. Serverpod comes with a set of default database tables that you want to have installed in your database. And the apply migrations command, when you pass it to the server, it will run those migrations, so we get everything installed. So
yeah, and it includes logging in the migrations table that this migration has been run, which is always it's like, how do you know if a migration has been run yet? Well, we're going to need to add a migration to add a migration log table, and then we'll we'll note which ones we've run.
Yeah, I mean, if you miss that, you will get warnings, and it will tell you which database tables are missing. It actually, when you start up Serverpod, it will check your whole database and see that everything looks correct, and tell you you'll get warnings if something is missing. So that can be pretty helpful. So if we now go into the app directory here, so we go into Observable Flutter, we can run that with Flutter run, and I usually use Chrome because it's sort of the least hassle to get up and running.
Yeah,
it is trying stuff out.
Yeah, it is the least hassle for sure. I tend to go like the desktop build, and I use Mac OS. So for me, it'd be Mac OS.
Yeah.
But then, then you do have some Xcode headaches potentially, but you have hot reload, and that's
yeah, that's a good point. So when you do that setup with Serverpod and run it on Mac, you also need to change your Xcode settings to allow, like for your project, to allow outgoing connections. For some reason, that's not on by default. Although, is there even a single app that doesn't have that, like, on?
Right.
What app is that? I don't know, but
yeah, I share
anyway,
your confusion.
It's Loctite. So just to check that this is working, we can send a test message here, and
so let's dive into this. I'd love to look at all the code that is running here, and let's understand what we got.
That makes sense. So if we look into the server, we're in the library folder, in the source folder, we have an endpoints directory. This is where we place our endpoints and our endpoints method that we can call. So we have an example endpoint here, and it comes with a little bit of instructions. So the first time you build this, it'll give you some hints on how to build something. But what you need to do is create for this to work, you need to place your endpoints in the endpoints directory. You can have subdirectories there if you want. And you need to extend the endpoint class. Those are like the only limitations. And then it's like having like an endpoint suffix here on the name is best practice, but you don't need it. You can call it whatever.
Okay.
And then we have a hello method. And what this does, for this to work, or for Serverpod to recognize your methods, it must return a future of dark type, like the basic types, or one of your models. And the models can also contain other models, so you can be like a whole tree of that.
The reason of course, is that you know how to serialize all the base types, and then the generated models know how to serialize themselves.
Exactly.
Can you return a simple thing like a list or a map that contains models?
Yes.
Okay.
You can return list and maps, and you can also have nullable object, like in any configuration there. And the first parameter of your method needs to be a session object. This is because the session will give you access to like your whole like Serverpod, and what's like it's a little bit like the build context in Flutter.
Right.
And then
and server side frameworks pretty much all have something like this, and it's either called session or request, and it's like where the HTTP headers are, where the authenticated user is found, like all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And then we can just add parameters like we will to any Dart method. You can also use named parameters or optional parameters. So all that works. And typically you want to make these async. But this will just return the, the name you pass in and say hello. So we can, sorry, look at what this looks like in our Flutter app now. If we go to the main file here, it creates, Serverpod will create a default Flutter project. It's a little bit different from what you get with Flutter Create, but the principles are the same. It's just a very simple demo app, but it's this hello world app. So the main thing we have here is our call hello method that we are calling whenever we press that send button. And it will call the client. Client is like a global singleton. I mean, you can have potentially have multiple clients. It's just an object, but it could be useful to have that as a global variable. And then we have the name of the endpoint and the name of the method, and then we just send it a string.
So example there is coming from the fact that it was example endpoint, right?
Yes.
Example endpoint was the name of it.
Yeah. So we remove the endpoint part of
right.
that name and then just use the example.
And then hello was, of course, the method that we wrote. And
Yes.
that code is all on the server. And we are calling something here directly in our front end code. So this has obviously been code generated.
Yes. So, I mean, we can have a look at what this looks like, but I'll warn you, it's not easy to read. So this, if we jump to that hello method on the client, it will basically know what the names of the endpoints, the method, and the parameters we are sending to the client. So that is, it won't take you to whatever you wrote on the server. It will take you to this. So that can be a little bit hard to read, and it also connects
right
modules.
Well, I mean, I think
and stuff.
Yeah, if you look at what you've got there on line 22, then I mean that is pretty clear to me. I can imagine what code generated stuff this talks to map those strings to the actual classes and the actual methods and parameter names even. And you know, in Dart you can't have runtime introspection, and that's why Dart has code generation. So like at runtime you can't take an arbitrary string and find the property on something from it, but you could do it in advance and generate it. And so there's something that says like, if the value of the first parameter is example, then use the example endpoint. And you know, those things they're lining up because it's all code generated by the same system.
Exactly. Actually, the very first version of Serverpod used mirrors because you can run it on the server.
Oh yeah, mirrors is honestly, I'm not an expert on all the mirrors things, other than it's like kind of not
so it does have
anymore.
support for some sort of introspection. You can do it, but it was way better with the code generation. So we just switched all that out. Plus,
I didn't know that you ever built a version of this that used mirrors. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was way back. It went away pretty fast, to be honest. All right.
By the way, one thing I want to say, some folks are asking great questions in the chat, and just know that I am starring them and am going to come back to these at different moments. So your questions are not just being lost into the ether. Just so you all know, great questions, and they're going to be answered. Okay, back to you, Viktor.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do now is to add a few models or modules to our app. We're going to add a module for authentication and one for the chat server. So how we do this is we just basically add it to our hub spec of the server. Let me close the Flutter because it's tough when you have a small screen. Otherwise,
I feel your pain.
This is the question for you. Why is PubGet sometimes so slow? it's like it does its thing, but then it's just hangs for like a minute.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been.
Is it just me or and my colleague?
No. VS Code and I have been giving each other some side eye recently, so
All right.
you're not alone.
Okay, good to know. So that installed like the dependencies,
Hmm.
but to get us to work, we need to also run. Oops, no, I need to go to the server side here. Serverpod generate, because
Hmm.
we need to generate those module interfaces into our client. So we just type serverpod generate, and that will analyze all our code and build it. And we'll now see that, like in the client, we got something that is a little red and angry. So we'll check what that is, and you can see here it tries to import a few things that we don't have, and that's the client for the module. So we're going to have to add these to the pubspec too, by just doing serverpod auth client, and we just use the same versioning on everything, and then it will be happy.
Yep. So Serverpod, so you add these things to the client and the server, and I forget, do you
Yes.
also add them to the Flutter app or just the client and the server?
So it depends a little bit. In this case, we're going to add a few things to the Flutter app. So that's the
Okay.
Flutter code for like visually displaying the chat. So the client will keep track of all like the communication stuff. And then we have Flutter code for actually showing a login button and stuff like that. All right, so that should be happy now. If we go back to our server here and start it, I'll see what that looks like now. Well, this is okay. So so here you can see that we get a bunch of warnings of the tables we're missing. So these are related to our to the modules we added. So we
Right.
need to get this into our database somehow.
Yeah, and because you had run apply migrations when you first started the server, and so
Right.
that added the absolute base Serverpod tables, but now you've added these different modules, so we have to run apply migrations again.
Exactly. So actually, first we need to do a Serverpod create migration. So that will create the migrations for updating all the things from our modules. So we can actually look what that looks like. You see, it's here.
I see.
So here we have two migrations. One is the one when we first created the project, and the second one is the one we created now. So if we look at the inside the migration, you have both like a representation of what the database should look like in this is like a JSON object that describes everything, like a description of the database. And then we have a migration SQL. So this is SQL code that we're going to run to install all these tables. But Serverpod will like generate this for you. So now I can just start the server again with apply migrations, and hopefully it should be happy. So it now says that we applied this database migration here, and which run. And you can also create multiple migrations, and they will be run after each other.
Yeah. So my little bit of momentary confusion there, even though I was just doing this recently, in old server side things, I've used different modules that you install kind of bring their own migrations. But the way Serverpod works is they only bring their definitions of tables. And then once they're added, now they're kind of in the ecosystem. And so then the create migration command will find those definitions of tables and spit out the migrations that will realize those tables.
We did it like the way you described first, but it turned out to not work so well. This turn out to be much easier and a better user experience.
Okay. Were there issues of those generated migrations being stale from modules?
It was pretty hard to keep everything in sync in a good way.
Okay.
Especially when you come to having maybe different versions, or you do like a pub upgrade. So we want to be able to support that in the future. And that can be really tricky. But this system works super well. So we're going to probably the day we need it. Then maybe you can actually, sometimes you may need to do a little bit special stuff in your migrations. So you can actually add that migration code, the SQL code, if you need to add your own stuff in there. So that's totally fair to do, and not a bad practice. Sometimes you may want to do that to preserve data, or there can be reasons.
I was I had meant to ask that question, so I'm glad you just brought it up, because even this weekend, this past weekend, when I was playing around with some Serverpod, I found that I wanted to write some stuff in these migration files, and it seemed to work great. And I didn't know, like, am I going to cause some friction for myself down the road? But it seemed fine.
Yeah. I saw you posted like an issue, or my coworkers told us about it.
Well,
like, this is a cool idea. No. No, I think definitely something we're looking into, but it may be a little bit down the road.
Yeah, it's okay.
So let's see.
For anyone wondering, the feature I was requesting was to run arbitrary Dart code with a migration.
Yeah,
which of course would do things like read tables and seed other data or whatnot.
Which would be super useful. The problem is, as your server evolve and that code is stale, that could cause like
absolutely
stuff further along the line. So I think that's the main issue. But we have sort of a repair migration, so it could be cool to add that as a part of a repair flow, or like a one-shot thing you do. Maybe more like that, but it could be hard to keep it. Like, if you change the schema of the database and stuff over time, could break that code, and then your server won't compile.
Yeah, I'm I'm extremely. Django has custom Python that you can run in migrations, and they supply you a version of your ORM that is generated specifically for how your database was at that point, based on migrations to that point, which is way more easily done because it's all at runtime reflection instead of code generation. So it would be a real challenge to do in Dart.
Yeah, that is true. Maybe it could be sort of a standalone thing. Next, I thought we look at into the server.dart. This is on your server. This is sort of the main file, or actually the main file. We'll just call this run method here in your server. And that creates a server pod, and then actually Serverpod comes with a web server too, not just because sometimes you want to have like a web page, or you want to place your Flutter web app somewhere. So just provide that too. That's still a little bit experimentally. I mean, it totally works and is good, but we may change the interface of that a little bit in the future. And then we start the server, and then we'll start like everything up. But here, for our authentication to work, we need to add a configuration. So let me check here. Exactly.
And all this stuff, by the way, as you're looking this up, everything that you're adding for this auth feature that we're stapling on is just right in the documentation for the auth module.
Yeah.
So you're not
definitely.
like pulling this out of your divine knowledge of
Yeah. No, you can find all this information. I think maybe the chat module is the one we have documented the least. There's an example you can run with very similar code to what we're going to do today.
A little divine knowledge there.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So we're going to import here the package. Let's see, Serverpod. It's fine, and we're going to call that auth. So this is to get hold of the authentication module. And before we start the server, we want to create a configuration here. So there's auth config, and then there's a set command that creates sort of a global authentication configuration for the server. And the things we need to add here, because we're going to do email authentication, but I'm not going to set up the whole sending out of emails that you probably need to use some third-party service for, like SendGrid or whatever they're called.
Mailgun or whatever, yeah.
Exactly. There are many options, and they're pretty easy to interface from Dart too. So there are two methods we need to fill in here. The first one is to send a validation email. Let's see here. We want to make this.
Oh yeah, I was doing this weekend.
It is. And we can just, for the ease of things, do it.
Exactly.
Classic.
Yep.
And validation code. Yeah, there we go. And it needs to return true. So it's also a place where we can potentially abort the validation. And same goes for if someone want to reset the password. We have a password reset email. Yeah. And I'm just going to print the same thing here. And this needs to be async. Otherwise, they'll be angry with us. Okay.
It was briefly pretty angry.
So now we installed both the authentication module and the server module, or the chat module. The chat module has a similar configuration, but that configuration will sort of work out of the box. So we don't need to change anything there if we don't want to, but we can, for instance, configure callbacks when things happen in the chat, when you send a chat message, or when someone joins the channel, to check if they are allowed to join that channel and stuff like that. We can add callbacks for. But I was thinking for our chat, we are going to build a little bit like Slack. And there in Slack, you have different channels, right? So we're going to add a channel model in our lib source models here. We have an example already that looks pretty simple with a string in the data, but I'll just create a new object here, or a new file that we call channel by YAML list. You can use just use YAML too, but this will work everywhere in your project. Otherwise, it needs to be in the models folder for our fancy new VS Code extension to work. So you can see it's a little bit red. It's because we actually analyze these files as you type, just like the Dart analyzer. So if I add a class channel here and some fields, it will be happy. So in Serverpod, you will define your models in YAML. And the reason we do this is both it gives you, it will generate a lot of code for this. You get like a copy with method, you get like serialization, and we can, and all the database bindings for free. Could potentially have done it with annotations in Dart, but it comes with a whole bunch of issues when you add like code on your server that may relate to other server objects. So it just gives you a very nice distinction between, like, this is your protocol and your database bindings. Plus, from this, we will also be able to, in the future, generate clients for other languages, like JavaScript would be given one, and then you can use it from a web page or from maybe you have something that needs to get to React Native, or who knows. It was nice, and that will be very, very hard if we do it from without
in just our code.
Yeah,
indeed. I didn't know that you had any plans to support non-Dart languages.
Yeah, I think that's especially JavaScript is the one we will need to support at some point.
It makes sense. Yeah.
So
all right, so let's add fields.
Yeah, we're adding a name field for our making that a string, and I think we just have one called channel here. That's also a string. So the name will be basically this display name, and the other is an identifier for a specific channel. But we also want to add this to our database. So we can just add the table here, and we call that channel. And after this, we're going to need to run Serverpod generate.
And you run Serverpod generate before or after well, I guess the order doesn't matter, like between creating and applying the migrations and Serverpod generate, order probably doesn't matter, right?
Probably doesn't matter, but you're right. For this to work, we also need to add a migration. So we're going to do that with Serverpod create migration. And if we now look into our migrations folder, we have 3 migrations here. So the last one will create this new channel table for us.
Nice.
And you can also add new fields to your model, and it will sort of create a code for just those fields and stuff like that. All right. So we have that, and now we should be able to just start our server again, and it should be happy. To actually see what's going on inside your database, I'm going to use Postgres is the one I use. Okay, this is
same. I love this app.
Yeah, did I? Okay. I guess I did this in a little bit of a test run before, but so it's pretty much pre-filled here. But I'll show where you find these details. So Serverpod comes with a configuration directory, and here you have different configurations. We have a development environment, we have a staging environment, and a production environment. So it depends on where you deploy your Serverpod. So we're going to work in the development environment. So this will specify which ports Serverpod will use, and how we connect to the database and stuff like that. So if we look at the database section, you can see we're connecting to localhost on port 8090. The name of the database is Babel, and we're using the Postgres user. We also need to look into the password.
Yep.
And here we have the database password. So we're going to copy this into Postico.
And those port numbers, can they be changed after?
Yes.
Okay. And then if you run Docker Compose up again, it'll find the new ports?
If you want to change the port, you can change that in like the Docker Compose
file. You have to do that
file.
as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it can be done. So I was thinking here, now you can see all the database table we have in here, and channel, we're just going to add 2 channels. So one could be alert. We can maybe general with a capital G.
You have
introductions.
You have not agreed with yourself on the spelling of general.
Yeah, you are right.
which I say as a typo-prone person myself.
Yeah, so we can basically add any number of channels. If you have any ideas for a third channel, we can add it into.
You seem pretty good.
Okay, we'll go with this. So we'll have two channels, one general and one introductions. Now what I was thinking is we're going to add an endpoint here to get those channels over to the client. So let's see. Can call that.
So you're on the server right now.
Yes.
Right. This in the server code, and you're in the endpoints folder, which was created by Serverpod create.
Yeah.
And you're adding a new file to that folder.
Exactly. So here we're going to add an endpoints class, which allows us to add methods. Let's just double check here. I have a little cheat sheet.
No worries. That's smart. You can also see if GitHub Copilot is up to the challenge of understanding Serverpod code.
It's a hit and miss.
I bet.
Yeah, so we're going to add a class here that we call channels endpoint that extends
endpoint, right?
Yeah.
Yep. We love it. Love it.
And to here, we are going to return all our channels. So if we create, it needs to return a future. And we're going to make that a list
of channels. Yeah, love it.
Okay. We'll probably need to
have to import that.
Import, yeah. And we can call it get channels, seems like a good name. And the first parameter needs to be the session object here. And we're going to make it async. So now we need to retrieve our list of channels, and we do that with ORM. And Serverpod has already created the classes since we defined that table keyword in our YAML file. So we get those by awaiting. We can access the channel object here that we just defined and generated. And it comes with a DB field that gives us access to all the database things. That's like a reserved word you can't use in your YAML file.
So we can't have a field named DB.
Yes, if you add a table keyword. Otherwise, I guess it's fine.
Got it. Okay.
And we're going to use the find method here, which takes our session to get access to the database. And I'm going to,
so does find method by default grabs everything?
Exactly. But this is where your sort of, you can get access to all, if you want to search for things in your database, you do that with the find method. So we can add a where clause here. So we only want to select or find or filter out the rows that fill some specific criteria. So this can be, I can call this channel here. And we made this as a method because, sort of a builder method, because this channel object here will give us access to all the fields in our model. So that allows us to do this in a very type safe, nice way. So if I take the channel here, I can find all the columns, for instance. We have a name. And on this, I have a bunch of methods. So for instance, when I check if that equals something, I can just do equals.
Okay.
Say equals my channel, or maybe.
Which would, of course, return nothing. Now we would return only the general channel.
Exactly. So
now, I have a question.
How you build? Yeah.
When I see code like this, I often think this is going to run a query that does a full table scan, brings out every single result, and then matches the appropriate results in Dart code, which I assume is not what is actually happening. So walk me through, what does this where parameter do?
So yes, I mean this will just perform as a select query, but you can also add like indices to make it really fast in your model. So you will do that in your model file. If you have a table, you can add. So in this case, maybe we want an index for the channel if we want to find those quickly, for instance.
Sorry, what I was let me restate my question.
Yeah.
Does this add a where clause to the query?
Yes.
Okay, so you're deducing what to put in the where clause from the method on line 8.
Yes. So
How do you do that?
So this
We don't actually have to go into it now, but
so this actually returns an expression, which is like a database expression, which is a query.
Nice.
So
okay, so this is how we write.
And if we look at the name, you can see that is a column string type. So the column string type has a number of methods for like equals, or you can do like, for instance, if you need to search a little looser criterias. And you can also bundle these together. And we used, like, if we want to find something that's general, and we can do it like this. Oops. Channel name,
Nice.
channel, what's the other
Wait,
name?
you really use one ampersand like the bitwise operator?
I wish we could have overridden the and.
Oh, but you can't do it. Okay.
No, you can, but it will return a bool, which will not work in this case. So I guess the other option we could have made a method that was called maybe and have different parameters.
Yeah. No, I think it's okay. This is okay. I was just a little surprised, but I don't think it's bad.
Yeah. I know it's so that's how we can build a longer query basically, and string things together. And you can also use, like, if we have integers, you can just use the little bigger or smaller signs and stuff like that. That would work. We have overridden them too.
Yeah, Phil is you're correct there. I was wondering whether or not this evaluation was happening in the database or in Dart code, and I'm just getting details on what's happening in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in the database, right? Because the query has, like, the rules are defined in Dart code, but the actual evaluation happens in the database.
Yeah.
If you're adding a where clause to the query.
So Serverpod has a query builder. So it takes the expressions that you have, and then it builds a query from those, passes that on to Postgres, gets a result back, and knows how to, like, parse and piece everything together. Returns it to you. So this is a pretty simple case, but you can have pretty advanced cases where you have relations, you search different tables and patch them all together. So that gets, like, really gnarly inside of Serverpod, but it's still this rather clean interface in that you work with.
Nice.
So in here, we're just going to return the channel to make the Dart analyst here happy. And we can also remove the example endpoint we're not going to use. So I'm just going to delete that.
Fairly well, example endpoint.
Yeah. And we now see, like, the generate code is a little bit angry because we also need to run Serverpod generate here to make sure everything is correctly connected.
And there is just and folks who have not done full stack development, which is of course fine if you've not, there's no, trophy from the cosmos if you have done full stack development. But if you haven't, it might not be obvious just how much work is being completed by these little lines of code and Serverpod generate. I mean, ooh, this is a really easy way to get some values out of your database into memory in your Flutter app.
Yeah.
And not even just as maps of raw data, but as hydrated models, like crazy.
Yeah. And on top of this, we also added, like when you build something, this is great for getting started. It's pretty easy to use, but it also scales. We have built-in caching, for instance, so you can.
Oh, nice. I'd love
just
to take a look at that if we have time today.
Maybe we can save that for a little bit later.
Yeah, at the end.
If we have time in that. But definitely, I mean, it's just a few lines of code to do it, actually. But if we look at the Flutter app now, that is a little bit angry because we removed the example endpoint. So I figured we can just fix that up and just test it with the endpoint we added instead.
Yeah.
So we have the client here, and the result, I think, is invalid result. Yeah.
Well, it's client.
It's going to be a string.
Channels we need now, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we can just replace this with channels, and then we have the get channels method. And this will, you can see the result here is a list of channels. So to print this out, we can just do maybe a toString here. And we're going to start the server. Amazing.
So once this works, then I think it'll be a potentially good time to stop and hit some questions.
Oh, yeah.
Because we'll have seen some magic.
Let's hope so.
This summer, Serverpod
okay. It's not
giving us errors.
I think we need to do a Flutter pub get here. Maybe could that be it? Since we added the modules.
Oh.
I haven't done that.
It did indicate just adding them, so I think you were correct.
Yeah. So it's stuck again. Let's talk to your teammates.
Flutter pub get is just hanging on you?
Yeah. Like at the end, I think it's like done. I can probably do Control C.
I see.
And it still works, but
interesting.
It happens to all three of us here, like every other time we run Dart pub get or Flutter pub get.
Okay. Yeah, that feels like, I mean, I've had weirdness recently as well, so it doesn't feel like we're very likely alone.
Yeah.
But
so if we send something here now, we will get, like, this is the JSON representation.
The toString method.
Yeah. Right. So the toString actually defaults to the serialization of the objects. So it's actually real Dart objects that we have, but it prints them out as serialized.
That's so wild. The amount of work that this does is super bananas.
I mean, compared to defining all these things, manually, it's quite a bit of work, and it's also not fun work to do.
No. So God bless you for doing all the not fun work. So the rest of us can just do the fun work.
You're welcome. So you had some questions there.
Yeah. So folks have asked a bunch of good ones in the chat. I'm scrolling back up to the top. There's a bunch. I'm not going to probably be able to do all of them right now. We'll try to move fast. Cron jobs. What's the story with Serverpod and cron jobs?
Definitely. We have something we call future calls, which is basically a method you call sometime in the future. So for instance, you have a user who signs up, and then you want to send them an email 1 week from now. Then you can say, call this method 1 week from now. And Serverpod will save that into the database for you, serialize it, and then we'll know to pull it out a week from now. And it just happens like magic.
Incredible.
So that is sort of our solution to cron jobs. But obviously you can also run Serverpod in maintenance mode that will just start it up, run something and shut it down. So you can use that in your production environment. If you want to apply migrations, for instance, it can be a useful case for that. Or if you want to do some maintenance task that you want to call from someplace else, that also works. So there are a few different options for doing that.
And that is just there's a role equals maintenance flag that you pass to do the maintenance mode.
Yeah,
thing, right?
exactly. Yeah.
All right, next question. Dart macros are coming, hopefully.
Yeah,
Will you embrace it?
for sure. I think it won't be our like top priority to do it for the serialization because that's sort of already done and works really neat.
Right.
But I think for maybe you probably know this better than I do, but I think it would be pretty cool to do in terms of enabling features and maybe exposing a little bit different interfaces. So say you run Serverpod Mini, we can hide all the database objects and stuff like that, so you don't even like can autocomplete to them. Right now, we throw like an exception, but I think that could be a use case. So
Interesting. Yeah.
Add those with.
Do you use Build Runner now, or are you just do you have custom Dart code that reads these YAML files?
We have a lot of custom codes, but we use the is it called like Builder Code Builder or something like that to generate.
Yeah, there's build, and then there's Build Runner, and there's Source Gen, which builds on top of build.
Yeah,
and Build Runner is I think just the CLI.
We patched it together with like the Dart analyzer, and there's a package by the Dart team for building Dart code, so we're using that to generate the code.
Okay,
because it just helps a lot with like maintaining packages and stuff.
Yep. All right, next one. Server runs in a Docker container, and that means it's probably stateless. So would this be suitable for running on Cloud Run? A very appropriate, very apt question.
So whether you make your server stateless or not is up to you, but we definitely support that. So unless you store a state in your server, you are fine on Cloud Run. So that we have like a page for how to set that up.
Yeah, there's even Terraform files.
Yeah. So that is pretty easy to set up. Yeah.
Related question: how would this project be scaled with Kubernetes?
So we have two solutions for that. Basically, Cloud Run will scale up. We also have support there for connecting to both Postgres and Redis. So Redis can be used for passing messages between servers. So for instance, in the chat we're building, you may want to, have multiple servers, and you need to send chat messages between those. So that is something we can do and support. But you have two options basically to deploying, and that's Cloud Run or Cloud Engine. And Cloud Engine comes with like an auto-scaling cluster. But we're also building, that's actually what we're working on right now, putting most of our time into, is building a hosting service for Serverpod. So it'll be like a Serverpod deploy command, and that will set everything up for you. And we're building that on top of Google Cloud, but it will be very, very easy to, get everything right with that. And we take care of all the maintenance.
Can't wait to use it.
Yeah, I know.
That would be great.
It will be. It will be.
Last question for now.
Yeah.
A lot of folks ask Muaz about MySQL. Any plans to add MySQL as a backend? / is the ORM pluggable such that an adventurous developer could write the MySQL bindings themselves?
Right now, that would be a little bit tricky, but it's definitely something we're going to plan to break out. I mean, we have basically all code is generated within like a SQL builder. So we need to make that be able to output maybe slightly different code for.
Right. Yeah, you probably want to have the SQL builder be like a pluggable thing that just implements in
exactly.
And it could be the MySQL one instead.
Yeah, there are a few more things in that we would like to make a little bit more pluggable and configurable, but we're getting there.
Yeah, nice.
So our main priority has been to make like a very smooth experience, and then maybe rebuild the infrastructure to make sure you can take out stuff and put other stuff in if you need to.
Yeah,
all right.
it's a big project. All right, well, yeah, let's plug on here with our a lot to go. We don't have a Slack client yet.
yeah. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here. And we actually have built everything we need for the server to
Incredible.
to be able to run this. And yeah, and it's up and running. So we're just going to build the Flutter app, and I'm going to we have the Flutter directory here, create source folder there, and I'm going to drop a few things in to that, and we can have a look at the things I drop in, but it will take a little bit too long time to code it all in one go, I think.
Yeah, this is a Serverpod episode. I think you are fully justified in pasting in some pre-written Flutter code.
Yes, I think that's the interesting thing. When you build like backends, at least with Serverpod, it's 95% of your code are in the Flutter app.
Flutter.
Yeah, the server part is actually not that much code most of the times. I'm going to paste in a new.
What an absolute dream.
We will need a few things in our pub spec here too, for this to be happy. So the dependencies we're going to add here are basically email authentication classes and this chat. See if it's, yeah, it looks happier. So the authentication comes in different parts. So we have a shared part for the code, and then we have different providers. You have like an email provider, you have Apple, you have Google, and then we have the Flutter codes for the chat. Chat actually comes with a text field and the chat box. So we're going to have a look. Maybe we can just run the app actually. I hope that works. Yeah, it did Flutter pub get, so we can probably just run it. And then we can have a look at the code and see what that looks like. Maybe easier if we take a look at the app first, easier to know what we're looking at. All right, so this is still a pretty minimal app, but we have the sign in with email, so I'm going to add me here.
No, wait, you're signing in or creating an account?
I'm creating an account here.
So if you have an account, what the button says at the bottom. Yeah, that's right. Sorry.
And then we'll ask you for the validation code. So typically you would want to have sent an email.
This.
But we're going to look at the server and see we have the validation code in our output here. So I can just take that and jump into. Never.
Thanks for trying, Chrome.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
And then we sign in here. So we can actually go back here. I'll CD into the Flutter app, and we can open another one. Do decrow.
I didn't even notice. I was just like, yeah, -- Chrome. That's right. Totally, that'll work.
It may not work.
Might not work.
So we basically open two instances of the app now. And we have the first one here, and I'll create an account for you. Call that.
How do you know that was my email address?
That's a wild guess.
Yeah. That movie with Vin Diesel was about me.
Oh.
I've never seen that movie. I thought it would be too close to home. I didn't want to be reminded of my day job.
You have a more exciting job than I have.
Yeah, jump on
Basically,
a lot.
what we have here is our app, and we have the channels. We have a general channel, introductions. So we'll pull that from our database. And if I write a message here, it will show up on both sides, basically. And we can also, switch to the introductions channel, and then we can jump in here, and it will be there.
All right, you know what I would say in this moment? I would say, yo, with like 6 or 7 O's.
You're into your XXX identity.
Yeah, no, but type it. Oh, we got to see the chat go both ways.
Wow. Yo, is that where he's typing? What do you say?
But on the right, you got to type it as me.
Ah.
Yeah, see, that's what I would say. Yo. Okay, so I'm going to switch to general on that one. Nice.
There you go.
Would you look at that?
So I mean, the server code for this is, seriously simple to add in. The Flutter code is a little bit more involved, but we have like the chat components that we have built for you, with like the message thing, and you can actually there's a builder method for building the messages, so you can style them any way you like. If you want little bubbles, or you can put this chat. It doesn't need to be full screen. It can be, you can put it in a drawer or something that pops up, or it's super flexible.
Right. So can we look at the networking code that both sent and then watches for new messages?
Definitely. So I think we're going to jump into the Flutter code a little bit here. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we have the main file is a little bit longer now.
Can you make this code a little bigger? I should have said this forever ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Is that Command plus, maybe?
Command plus, yeah.
Okay. Is that viewable?
Better. Should be pretty good.
Okay. So the first thing we do, which happened like in our other app too, is that we created a client and we're connecting to localhost. The reason we have that as a variable is because localhost on Android is a little bit different. I don't know if you know.
Yes. Yep.
So that's like a little fix for that. But then we're also attaching an authentication manager. And the reason we're doing that is you need it would have been really nice to be able to bundle it, but you'll need to use Flutter code to store things in like the shared storage, rather than writing things on disk that you cannot, like you don't have access to the shared settings in Dart. So that's sort of our solution, to have like 2 versions there. And then we have a connectivity monitor that knows if we're connected to the server, basically. And we can monitor that state. And then we set up a session manager, and the session manager is a part of the authentication module. So we pass in, like, this is a link to our authentication models, which gives the session manager access to all those endpoints. So we need a little bit of a hook to start it up, basically. And then we initialize it, which will basically load, our passwords and user account and stuff when you get there. If you're signed in already since last time, it will know. And then we have our app. This is just like any regular Flutter app. And you notice when we first got to the page, we had like a sign-in page. So the sign-in page will either display a sign-in screen with a sign-in with the email button. If we're not signed in, if we have signed in, it will connect to the chat and show our chat interface. So this is basically what happens here is that we have the session manager. We add the listener to it. So whenever our anything with our session changes will be notified. So that can be that someone is signing in or signing out. And the changed session status method, I think, is just called set state. So that will basically just rebuild everything when you sign in or sign out. And then we have the build method, which either shows the connection page, which will connect to the chat. That's sort of the next step. Or if we are not signed in, it will build this page with a sign in with the email button. And the sign in with the email button, that's also from the authentication package. So that's already pre-packaged. So you can just drop those in. Or you can design your own button if you want to. Also, it's just calling another method. That's basically what that button does. But we made it a little bit neat, so you can have the sign-in buttons for Google and Apple and Firebase or email. So that's how we handle the authentication parts. There's really not much more code than this, and it's equally little code if you add sign in with Google. It's only you have to do quite a bit of setup on Google Cloud to get it working with and configure it and get like the correct keys and everything. So it's a little bit of a project.
And did you implement all the OAuth stuff yourself, or are you using Firebase?
So we have done our own for email and for Google and Apple. And then we did Firebase. If you want to use anything else, you can use that, basically. Because Firebase supports everything.
Yeah, okay. So one person in the chat was asking about authenticating via phone numbers, which Firebase does. So is that like an escape hatch to get out and use Firebase's phone authentication?
Yes, you can do that. It's also pretty easy to build your own classes for that. You can sort of patch into the system with your own authentication methods. I think we got a pull request for that. We're going through all the pull requests this week, actually. So hopefully that's something that can get into there, get in there. Also, Facebook, someone did that we didn't. It's quite a bit of work to test all those and make sure we have a good tutorial and everything.
For sure.
There's quite a few steps to make them work. And for something like sending text messages or emails, you also need to have a service that can send them for you and integrate with that, which is usually not like a lot of code, but something you need to set up someplace else.
And it's custom. Yep.
Yes. All right. So let's have a look at this connection page, which is the next step. After we signed in, we'll get to that. And what this does here, it will both retrieve our list of channels, and then it will basically, the way the chat works, you have a chat controller for every channel you're part of. So you want to, that's why we have a map of chat controllers, and then we have a list. And in the init state, we also need to add a listener for like the connection status of for streams. So this will notify us if that stream goes down. Maybe we're disconnected from the internet. Maybe the server breaks. I mean, it can be different. Hopefully not, but it can be something happen with your connection, and then you get a notification. So that's what we're listening to there, and then we connect. So when we're using streams, we need to open that connection before we can start sending messages back and forth. And when we're disposing it, we just like remove all the listeners basically and dispose.
And this is basically just the overhead for real-time communication, right?
Exactly. So it's a little bit more complex here because we're also involving the chat. Otherwise, you typically want to listen to. We built a class for that can sort of keep track of your connection. So whenever you lose the connection, it will try to reconnect automatically, and then you can even display a little banner at the bottom of
retry
your
stuff.
app.
Yep.
Retry. Yeah. So we
I've
have.
been on trains that ride through tunnels, and it's
There
a
you go.
valuable feature. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we connect, basically we I guess reset everything to its initial states, and then we get our list of channels. This is the method we added, the get channels.
Okay.
And when we have that, we open a streaming connection. So that will open that connection. But if something breaks, it won't like reopen it. But we get the notification if that happens. We can try to reconnect.
Okay.
And then basically we go through the channels we have and create chat controllers for each of those channels. So we have a map of our chat controllers. I guess if anything goes wrong, we just say we're not connected. And when we build this, let's see, what is this method? If the connection changes, we we can check it and basically reset the channels. I think this does. It was a while since I wrote this code, I'll be honest.
No worries.
But the most important part here is basically the build method, where we have we can check if we are connecting, and then we show a loading page, and the loading page is just like a spinning little icon. We have that over here on that side. Very, very simple. And if we're disconnected, we show a disconnected page, and the disconnected page just have a reconnect button that will try to reconnect again. So that's the callback here on reconnect. Then we can call the reconnect method. And if everything is good, we're connected, and we have a set of channels, and we have a set of chat controllers, then we can build the main page. And this is like where the magic actually happens.
Right. This is the fun part.
This is the fun part. So, right. I think, it just keeps track of which channel is
the index.
Index, and then it will basically build a scaffold with a drawer. So our channel drawer, that's our channel picker on the side with the channels and which one we have selected, and we get a callback if that changes. And then we have a chat page, which is like the main page. So the chat page just have basically the chat view here, which expands to the whole window, and then we have the chat input. And I mean, that's the whole thing. So it's a little bit of boilerplate and setup to get all this working. Especially the chat itself is not that complex. It's more, having the drawers, switching channels, all that stuff. That's not part of the chat module. That is a little bit of sort of boilerplate in this example. So
nice,
So I pretty much took this code from, we have a set of examples in the Serverpod repository. So this is an example for the chat, if someone want to, play around with the code and try it out themselves.
Can you go to the chat view class? Like click into it. It's called on line 20 here.
Yeah, so that's part of
the build method of that.
Okay, this is probably a lot of code. This is part of that. No, we're now in the Serverpod code. So this is.
But this is code that a user might write, but you've just written it for them, right?
Yes.
So this is this is the kind of code. It's not generated code. This is handwritten code.
This is handwritten code. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as it turns out, I thought this would be a pretty simple task, but when you want to make a chat right, there's a lot of considerations. Like, say, if you're at the bottom of the chat and write a message, you want it to scroll up, right, in a sort of a nice way. But if you have scrolled up a little bit and reading stuff, you don't want to jump down. You don't want to jump down or have it like jump.
Right.
And also, if you are having a very long chat, maybe 1,000 messages, you don't want to load all those 1,000 messages at once, right?
Yeah, I got to paginate.
You want to have the latest ones, and when you scroll up, you want to add more chunks.
Get more. Yep.
You can also with this.
Yeah, it really is involved.
Yeah. Yes. We also added support for doing attachments, so you can actually upload files from the chat, or images, and we'll like resize and make thumbnails for it. I actually built this for an app that needed sort of a Slack interface.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about, to build a chat app, like you said, all those considerations are very real. I've built a fairly complete chat thing myself a handful of years ago, and all the things you're talking about, they're legit. But there's another aspect here. Like if you build this with Firebase, one of the cool things that it does, and you'll have to tend to all of those headaches that you just mentioned. But a thing that Firebase is great for is that instantaneous two-way real-time communication, right? It has a, you subscribe to like parts of a collection, and it keeps the WebSocket open. And just part of the magic of Firebase is that on the server, it keeps track of which clients care about which types of data. And then when new data arrives, it checks, okay, do any clients care about this? And it pushes messages to them. And it's all very incredible. And you're getting some real-time communication here as well, but that's not as obvious of a feature to implement in something like Postgres, where it's just a write log, and it doesn't really have a mechanic to emit events based on the appearance of new records. Or if it does, then I'm actually behind on Postgres's functionality. So how are you? It has.
Yeah.
Okay. But, so how are you getting the client to instantaneously update? Like how does something get the message onto the wire?
Right. That's a great question. Maybe we can build that.
Well, it's already working, right?
Yeah. I was thinking
we could build it again or something. Yeah.
Like add a new feature to this chat that is like a real-time feature, and we can walk through all those steps.
Sure, that'd be awesome.
So compared to,
can we do you think we can do it in a half an hour?
Easy. Yeah.
Incredible. Let's do it.
The thing is, there's a little bit of trade-offs there, like the approach they have in Firebase to what we have. I mean, what you're mentioning is pretty cool in Firebase for sure. So on Serverpod, you will need to relay those messages through Serverpod, basically. The benefit is that it's easy to, like, say you have a new app version that needs to speak with a new server. It's much easier to maintain that. That can be pretty tricky in Firebase, and when you scale it up. Also, if you do a lot of real-time communication, you typically do that through the database in Firebase, and they will charge you for every write. So say you have a game where you pass loads of data. You don't want that to hit the database. You just want to like pass it through the server, and it's probably a factor 100 faster too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, it can depend a little bit on your use case, which solution is best, for sure. But you can get all that done in Serverpod too. So let's jump into our server here, and we can create a new endpoint that will actually. I was thinking we could change the theme of the app, maybe collectively.
Perfect. Sure. Yeah.
So we're going to add a new endpoint here, and we can call that maybe. Let's see. A theme endpoint could be a good name.
I like it.
Wow. Oh, there we go. The menu popped up on my other screen. It looked pretty weird.
Yeah, it's like, that's what I wanted. Good job. Thank you. How'd you read my mind?
So all the endpoints you create in Serverpod, they also have sort of real-time capabilities. So we're going to create a class that is theme endpoint, extends endpoints. And we're going to create one more model here too let's see our model files. And we can call that maybe Babel theme. And this will be a little bit smaller, so we can call it Bubble theme. And let's just keep it simple and say it's dark. Have that a bool.
Love it.
I mean,
yeah,
you can,
nice.
Yeah, you can make this with an enum and stuff too, but for simplicity, we're going to do it like that. And then I need to run Serverpod generate here to get access to that file in my Dart code.
Yep.
Actually, when you're developing, we also have a watch flag here, so you can do it like so.
Oh, nice, great.
And then it will, because the first time you start it, it will be a little bit slow, but when you work with it, it's way faster. So here we're going to yes, we can have like a global variable here that is just if we are in the dark mode, so it can be a variable dark, maybe start not in dark mode. And whenever you open a stream to the server, you get like a stream open message. So there is a method we can override here, stream opened.
Okay.
And we probably want that to be async, and we can remove that. And when we first open the stream, we probably want to notify our user of the current state of the server. So this could be like your chat history, or it could be like we have an example where you can draw images collectively, and then
like
we want to have the whole image first. Yeah. So send stream message will pass a message to whoever connecting on this session. So for every user that connects, we'll get a call to this stream opened, and we get access to the session is bound to that user. And then we can pass as a message any serializable object. This can be the Babel theme. And yeah, we have a dark variable here. So
okay,
that should be fine. Then we get the current state. There's one more thing we need to do here to be able to have people call and modify the state. So we're going to add a listener to a message. So Serverpod has an internal messaging system where you can send messages between sessions or between endpoints, or like anywhere in the server you can where you have access to a session, you can pass on messages or listen to messages. So if we go into the session here, we have the messages, and then we can add a listener. And we need a channel name here. So it will listen on this channel, which we can call maybe theme change. And the message will be a Serverpod model like the Babel theme. And in this case, we know it will always be a Babel theme. So we can just do it like this, do a cast and say message as Babel theme. Now the theme will be a Babel theme. And then whenever that's sort of broadcasted on that channel, we want to pass that on back to the client. So then we have a send stream message here. And we can just actually, I guess, yeah, we don't really need to do this here. Maybe we need it later. Let's see.
So when you say that there's a messaging system, right? Like the first thing I think about is that this dark variable on this class, like if we deploy this to Cloud Run and it scales up with multiple nodes, then that dark variable is going to be initialized to false on all these different things. And if one message comes in from one client, it's only going to set it to true on whichever Cloud Run worker node they happen to be connected to, but none of the other ones will know.
Yeah.
But this messaging system gets around that.
So the message system gets around that. In this example, this is a stateful server. So I probably want to pull this from the database and keep that up to sync.
I see.
So,
okay.
So we can listen to that channel and like synchronize that across servers too. So that's how you typically would want to keep that up to sync. But in this example, this will only work on one server. Otherwise, it could
Got it.
Sync. Yeah. So that's a very valid question, actually. And we probably want to have a method that we can call when someone want to change the theme. So I was thinking they press a button and it will change the theme for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do a future here and we just make that like any method.
Right, future void, yeah.
And it will take a session. Otherwise, Serverpod will not be generating that code for us. And here we can first change it. So we can just say, do you call that dark?
Equals not dark.
Yep, seems easy. And just to have a little check here, it can be nice to have a little print and say theme dark.
Oh yeah, theme. Nice.
And then we can check that part works. It can be pretty handy to do a little printouts for debugging sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to pass this on to that channel that we're listening to on that session. So we're going to access the session for this call. So this will be different sessions. One is for the call and one is for that persistent connection.
Okay.
And we access the messages and we can say post message, and the channel name was theme
change, right? Yeah.
And now we need to construct a message that we want to pass on here, and that will be the bubble theme and dark.
Interesting.
So basically, what we have here, this is the work we'll need to do on the server. When we call the change theme message, we will basically post the message on the theme change channel and say is it dark or no, and we also switches from dark to not dark. And then we were listening to that on that stream that was opened by a client, and whenever they hear this theme change, it will pass that on and send that down the stream to our Flutter app.
Okay.
So with that, we are actually done with the server part of this. And we need to, oh yeah, maybe we had the watch flag, so it should probably be okay. We'll see.
Well,
dark. We can just start a server.
So we are restarting the server.
Yes. And we'll need to do a little bit of work on our Flutter app to get this to work. So if you jump into that main file we had, going to hide that so I can see it's not a lot of code you can see on this screen.
Nope. No, it isn't.
All right. So we have on the main page, I think, we have that drawer channel drawer, and it has a button here, a divider. Let's just put it down here.
Yeah, do you have an app bar? Could it just go there?
An app bar.
Yeah, and your like
Probably.
scaffold, do you have an app bar? Just thinking like what's the easiest place to put this button?
Yeah, I think this would be easy too, but that can
Okay, yeah, whatever.
App bar here, and we can have a trailing. That's actually
Or action, is that what it's called?
Yeah, actions.
Actions,
right.
yeah.
And then we do maybe icon button could be nice here. And the on pressed, and why is it so angry?
So I think you got the icon. Do you have to give it an icon, or do you give it icon data?
Let's see. That's a good question.
Maybe you give it. Oh, it's very upset about something. Parameter icon is required. I didn't see it. Was it at the top?
No. Is it like an icon? It should be.
Oh, it's because you have a closing parentheses after on pressed.
Oh, you're all right. Yeah, that makes it better.
And then I think you need to do go full stack is on it. You need icon that takes an icon data.
Icon, yeah. Okay.
So what?
Is there like a color or something?
I think you want to get rid of the S in front of the opening parentheses. And then what you have in the middle is good, I believe.
I'm just going to do the here. Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. Delete that S. There
Yeah.
we go. Nice. And then it just probably wants it to be const or something.
Yeah.
Oh, but now one more closing parentheses inside the closing.
Blind.
Right there.
Coding too little nowadays.
You're a classic CTO problems.
Yeah. I used to be good at this stuff.
God, it's so relatable.
Okay, so on pressed, we can get access to our client here, and then we have the
theme, right?
And we have
change theme. Yep. It doesn't take a parameter.
Boom. So let's see what that looks like.
So we should currently see a print statement on the server, but nothing changing the app because you're not actually changing the app theme yet.
Yeah. Oh, so it's right behind the debug symbol, but that's fine.
Perfect. Right where we want it.
Let's try to click that. And, okay.
Yeah, so we should just see print statements on the server, right?
Yes, I think so.
So to the right.
Yes. Thank you.
There it is. Yeah, fall through. Nice.
Okay, so we got that through. Now we just need to figure out how to listen to that stream.
Yep.
And that should be pretty simple. We already have like all the connection logic here. So I think when we have, yes, this is the connect method. So after we have done all the chat stuff to get all those controllers and hook them up, we can just do a client, and we have the endpoint that we call beam, and it has stream to it, and we can listen to that stream.
Whoa.
So here we get an event, and this will be a serializable entity, which is basically any
That's like the parent class of the model, right? Yeah.
Exactly. We're actually going to rename that to model in Serverpod 2. That's the plan.
Yeah. I saw that on your roadmap.
Yeah. And then here we can say like theme
equals event as theme, Babel theme or whatever.
Perfect. And then we can just maybe print here.
Sure. Yep.
Dark. See that we are like on track.
And you should have a nice toString on that model class.
Yeah,
right?
we can actually do it maybe like this. You are right.
No, yeah, I think it'll call the toString. I like just how you had it.
Yeah, it will. But we can add it like the dark
Okay.
boolean instead. It would be a little bit neater. All right. So with that, we can just restart our clients, and whenever we press this, we can see the output is actually
Nice.
changed.
And then it should be in the other Flutter tab as well. That's the real magic.
Yes.
Look
So
at
it's
that.
both of them.
Look at that.
So that's like
And that
basically how you
initial,
yeah.
the initial false came through because you broadcast the initial message as soon as they connected.
Exactly.
Because the first print statement is false.
Yes. Exactly.
Nice.
So that's our sort of initial state, whatever we have on the server.
Yep.
So I guess the only thing we need to do is
actually set the theme data.
Yeah. So what would the best way to do this be?
Well, I don't know where we are in the widget tree or what's going on.
2 widgets down. So should we just like add
we could honestly punt on it because this is basically probably add a provider, listen to it, set the theme data, call set state somewhere. It's like this is the normal Flutter busy code that everyone has seen, but the message has arrived, and so now you're good to go.
Yeah. Exactly. So maybe we don't need to cover that right now.
Right. Cool.
But it demonstrates how to do these things. Yeah, it's just like that. The rest is just Flutter state management, whichever solution you prefer.
Right. Yeah. Which one to use? It depends. Okay. Goodness gracious. That was awesome. So I have a few more questions folks asked that were pretty good. I starred, and then you and I each had a few things that we wanted to talk about. Offline support. Do you have any plans for that?
That's definitely something we're looking to doing. I mean, we're hiring a couple of more developers now, so we'll be able to do more stuff like that. We haven't really made an exact plan for how that will work, but I mean,
it's complicated.
It is complicated, but like the models we pass over already have like great serialization that works in your Flutter app as well. So if you want to save them somewhere and really open them up, that'd be really that's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, you could throw them into Hive, but the trick isn't just saving the changes that you've made. The trick is conflict resolution. Once you come back online and you try to send those writes over, and maybe some of them don't make sense anymore because of what other things have happened in the app. That's the hard part. Another good question from Go Full Stack about extending the user info. They wrote call, but I imagine they mean the whole model and everything.
Yeah. So that's a good question, right? Yeah, you can definitely do that. So the way you would do that is so the user info is a part of the authentication module. So the user info will have information like your name. We used it it's used in the chat with like the name, your avatar, stuff like that. But sometimes you want to attach more information to your user info. So the way the recommended way to do this is with a one-to-one relation. So you create another table, basically, or another model, and then you can link that hard to that other user info.
Exactly.
So
and then you put whatever other fields you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. An old rule of thumb that I picked up from my full stack days is you want one auth table that has no information other than what is required to authenticate a user. And then exactly like you even wrote user info. I don't know if that was the name of the model in auth or not, but sometimes you call it profile, whatever. That's where you put all the other fields that your app cares about, but you separate them from what is just strictly needed to authenticate that user.
Exactly.
Last question. I know the answer to this one is quick. Is there support to upload files?
Yes, definitely. So what comes when you sort of start your project is upload to your Postgres database. But we have built an interface so you can sort of replace that. That's a replaceable little module code. So it's pretty easy to get to work with AWS or with S3 services as well. So for instance, in the chat app, you can just enable the attachment thing, and that will just work, and it would actually upload the file straight to S3, and you can download them from your whoever you're sending the messages to and stuff like that. So that's something we definitely covering.
So Viktor, you have an event coming up that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, we are hosting a big Flutter conference that is called fullstackflutter.dev. And we have already 20 confirmed speakers, and they're like all, the best in the field. We haven't got any from the Flutter team yet, but I hope we can get some, I don't know. But we have 4 former Flutter team members that will be part of it.
It's pretty good.
That is still pretty good, right? I don't know how many have left, but I feel like I got a bunch of them.
I don't know how many have left either.
Yeah, it's also like the CTOs of like all the backend things you can do for Flutter. So for I think we have, I can't remember exactly which ones are confirmed or not, but yeah, we have one for .frog. We have one that's going to talk about I think Celeste is one, and there's one called Pharo. So it's like all the developers that are working on these projects that will talk about them. So that will be really awesome, I think. So we really want to focus on the whole ecosystem of not just Flutter, but also the Dart backend and like Shorebird doing updates over the air, or how you integrate it with your concurrent integration and testing, and sort of the whole thing I feel like Flutter is growing to more than just being what you see on the screen, but it's like the whole ecosystem that we want to cover with the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. And there's, go to the URL, folks. You'll see all the details about it. But the event is not in person. The talks are pre-recorded. So very easy for anyone to see these talks, and, the no FOMO about not being able to fly to the other side of the world or anything. Just tune in.
And it's free. Everything is free.
Incredible.
I think the only thing you need to do is basically sign up if you want to see it live.
Awesome. Will the videos be available on demand? Okay, nice.
Yeah, we're going to post them like over the next year. So it's still in this. Better to watch it live if you can, but they will all be there eventually for sure.
Gotcha.
That's the plan.
Cool. Well, one last thought on my end, folks. I was making a game for a while on Observable Flutter, and then kind of just felt enough time had gone into that. We'd all seen a bit of how game development goes. Not that my game development was particularly high quality, but my next project that I want to work on between other topics, other guests, just like that game kind of filled in weeks when I didn't have anything else, is going to be to build an app with Serverpod. So I want to actually really kick the tires on this and get to know it better myself. And so I'd love to hear any ideas that folks have. I want to not cut corners and build it the correct way, but it'll have to be very, very simple, of course, because I'm only going to work on it for an hour and a half a week at most. So I'm currently brainstorming. I'd love any ideas from anyone else, but I want to really go through the process of building something like this. I'm going to be deploying it to Google Cloud, hopefully, it's all that good stuff. So that's what's next on Observable Flutter. And I'd love to hear any ideas that people have on what I might build. And Viktor, if you have any ideas. just
right.
send them on
Yeah.
over. Not to put you on the
I
spot
will.
right now, but
I'll brainstorm with the team for sure.
great. All right, folks. With this is, I don't know if we've ever gone over 2 hours before, but this is going to compete for the longest stream ever. So I'm just going to hurry up and sign us right off here. But thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this as informative as I did. Viktor, thanks for coming on the stream. It was awesome. Next week, folks, we should be back at the normal time, and I will see you all then.